Mr. Crow to the Rescue, Chapter 6. As time went on, and the Green family overslept each morning, Rusty began to grow very weary of the monotonous cuckoo, cuckoo, which came every half hour all day long through the kitchen window of the farmhouse. "I'd like to know what sort of bird that is," he exclaimed at last. "If he'd only come out here in the yard, I'd ask him his name and tell him what I think of him, too." But the stranger never stirred out of the kitchen. At length, Rusty decided to make inquiries about him. Seeing Jimmy Rabbit passing through the orchard on his way home from the cabbage patch, Rusty called to him. "If you happen to see old Mr. Crow, I wish you would ask him if he won't please come right over to the orchard," Rusty Wren said. "There's something I want to find out, and Mr. Crow knows so much that perhaps he can help me." Jimmy Rabbit declared that he would be delighted to deliver the message. And he must have gone out of his way to find Mr. Crow, for the old gentleman arrived at the orchard in less than 16 minutes. Rusty was waiting for him, and having explained about the strange bird as well as he could, he asked Mr. Crow what he thought. "I'd like to hear his song," said old Mr. Crow. "Come right over to my tree near the house," Rusty urged him. Mr. Crow hesitated. "Where's Farmer Green?" he inquired. "Oh, he's working in the hayfield." "Where's Johnny Green?" Mr. Crow asked. "Oh, he's in the hayfield too, riding on a hayrake," Rusty Wren explained. "I'll come with you then," Mr. Crow croaked. So they flew to the dooryard, and they hadn't waited there long when the strange bird sang his cuckoo, cuckoo. "There," said Rusty, "that's his silly song." And to his surprise, Mr. Crow haw-hawed right out. "What's the joke?" Rusty Wren wanted to know. "That's not a bird," said old Mr. Crow, "or at least, it's not a real bird. He's made of wood, and he lives inside a cuckoo clock." "Ah!" Rusty cried, "an alarm clock!" But old Mr. Crow shook his head. "No," he replied, "it's just an everyday clock, and instead of striking, it lets this little wooden bird come out and sing." Rusty Wren said he wouldn't care for a clock like that, and that he didn't see why Farmer Green had brought it home anyhow. "Cuckoo clocks amuse the women and children," Mr. Crow remarked wisely. "Then you think Farmer Green was not dissatisfied with my singing? You think he would like me to wake him up every morning just as I used to?" Rusty waited eagerly for Mr. Crow's opinion. Old Mr. Crow pondered for a while before answering. He reflected that since it was long past corn planting time, it really made no difference to him whether Farmer Green overslept or not. If the corn had just been put in the ground, he would have liked to have Farmer Green stay in bed all day long. "I understand that the whole family enjoys your songs," Mr. Crow told Rusty at last. "And for the present, you may as well sing your dawn song right here in your own tree beneath Farmer Green's window. But if you're living here next spring, I wish you would consult me again." Rusty Wren agreed to that, thanking Mr. Crow for his kindness too. And afterward, instead of being angry, he laughed whenever he heard that silly cuckoo, cuckoo. Since he knew it was only a wooden bird, Rusty Wren was jealous no longer, The next morning, he awakened Farmer Green at the break of day, and the hired man was so sleepy that he fell downstairs and couldn't work for a whole week. Here's an illustration that shows Mr. Crow and Rusty Wren talking to each other. Chapter 7. A Neat Housekeeper. Rusty Wren's wife was a very neat housekeeper. Every day she carefully cleaned her house, chirping while she worked. Sometimes her voice was sweet and pleasant, but at other times, though it was still sweet, it was not pleasant at all, and whenever Rusty heard that second kind of chirp, he was always careful to find some errand that took him away from home. You see, Rusty Wren was not so orderly as his wife. Often he scattered things about the house in a very careless fashion. For instance, if he happened to notice a bit of moss or a burr clinging to his coat, just as likely as not, he would brush it off and let it fall upon the floor. And when Mrs. Rusty found anything like that in her cottage, she always knew how it came there. Rusty sometimes remarked that it was a good thing he didn't smoke. "How would you like it if I dropped a bit of tobacco or ashes and maybe burnt matches for you to pick up?" he asked his wife. "You couldn't come inside my house if you used tobacco," she always replied, and she would get quite excited at the mere thought of such an untidy habit. And then Rusty would smile, but he always took good care not to let his wife see him. "Don't worry," he would say, if she became too stirred up. "I've never smoked yet, and I never expect to." One can see that Rusty Wren was somewhat of a tease, and as it usually happens with people who amuse themselves at the expense of others, there came a time when Rusty's teasing landed him in trouble. One day, after he had come home from an excursion to the pasture — he seldom strayed so far from home as that — Mrs. Rusty began sniffing the air. Her nose would have wrinkled, only it couldn't, because it was so hard. She looked at her husband suspiciously, and it seemed to her that he had a guilty manner. "I declare," she said, "I believe you've been smoking." And she started to scold so angrily that Rusty Wren knew she must be in a temper. Seeing signs of trouble, Rusty began to fidget, and he moved about so uneasily that his wife was all the surer of his guilt. She stopped right in the middle of her scolding to say, "I smell smoke." "Perhaps you do," Rusty admitted, "but it's certainly not tobacco smoke." "Ah," she exclaimed, "then you've been smoking corn silk or hayseed, and that's almost as bad." Rusty said it must be the smoke of a pine stump that she noticed. "Farmer Green is burning some old stumps in the pasture," he explained, "and I just flew through a cloud of it." Just then he happened to notice a bit of something or other clinging to one of his tail feathers, and though his wife was looking straight at him, he flicked the tiny scrap upon the floor without thinking of what he was doing. "There you go again," Mrs. Rusty Wren cried. "Here, I've just finished cleaning the house, and you're littering it all up. You don't care how much work you make for me." And she pounced upon the brownish bit, intending to pick it up and throw it out of the house. Rusty had already decided that he had better go away from home for a little while, until things were pleasanter, when his wife suddenly faced about and fixed him with her glittering eyes. "Ha!" she cried, holding up the scrap in her bill for him to see. "Tobacco!" she screamed. "And what, pray, have you to say to me now?" Uh-oh. I think Rusty is in trouble. And that's why you never smoke, kids. Chapter 8. Rusty in Trouble. Rusty Wren edged towards the door. That little opening in the syrup can, only slightly bigger than a 25-cent piece. He wished he was already safely through it, for he did not like the look in his wife's eyes. "I must be going now," he said faintly, though he was generally as bold as brass. "Wait a moment," Mrs. Rusty ordered. "Where did this tobacco come from?" She spoke somewhat thickly, for she still held a bit of the brown leaf in her bill. I can't imagine," he stammered. "I never knew it was sticking to my tail until I saw it and brushed it off." "On my clean floor," his wife interrupted. "Goodness knows it's bad enough to have you forever doing things like that without your bringing tobacco into my clean house, and without smelling of smoke, too." For almost the first time in his life, Rusty Wren was really worried. Somehow he had managed to get into something of a good deal like a scrape. It seemed to him that the house was terribly hot and stuffy, and always before he had thought it quite comfortable. "I'm going out for a breath of fresh air," he protested feebly. And before Mrs. Rusty could stop him, he dodged past her and slipped through the tiny doorway, leaving her to scold to her heart's content. All this happened in the middle of the morning, and the cuckoo clock in Farmer Green's kitchen had sung the hour 6 times before Rusty Wren returned. Never before had he stayed away from his snug house so long, and, naturally, that made him have a guilty feeling, as if he had really done something to be ashamed of. As for smoking, he had, as he said, never smoked in his life. It was true that Farmer Green was burning stumps in the pasture that morning, and that the odor of the smoke had clung to Rusty's feathers. But the bit of tobacco But the bit of tobacco that had clung to his tail was a mystery that he couldn't explain. It was a most unfortunate accident, but Rusty hoped that by that time, it was then the middle of the afternoon, he hoped that his wife had recovered from her displeasure. Usually when they had any difference of opinion, she felt better if he gave her plenty of time in which to scold. But now, Rusty was not quite sure of his welcome. He had never seen Mrs. Rusty so upset. "Are you there, my love?" he asked softly, as he alighted on the roof of his house. He did not care to go inside until he was quite sure that his wife was in better spirits. "The smoker has come home again," a peevish voice called out. And instead of bursting into the merry song which Rusty had been all ready to carol, he flew off across the yard and began hunting for something to eat. Since he couldn't very well go home, he thought that he might as well enjoy a good meal at least. Aw, poor Rusty. Chapter 9. All's Well Again. After Rusty Wren had revived his drooping spirits by eating heartily of 3 dozen insects of different kinds and sizes, he felt so cheerful that he couldn't help trilling a few songs. It was almost evening, and he was glad not to let the sun go down without thinking him in that way for It was almost evening, and he was glad not to let the sun go down without thinking him in that way for shining so brightly all day. Though it was so late, Farmer Green still toiled in the fields, but Rusty could hear Johnny and old dog Spot driving the cows down the lane towards the barn. Now, above the wide door of the carriage house, a window was open, a window through which Rusty had flown early in the morning. Unlike old Mr. Crow, Rusty Wren was not in the least afraid to enter any of the farm buildings. Perhaps if Rusty had been in the habit of taking Farmer Green's corn, he would have thought twice before venturing inside the cow barn or the carriage house. But since he never damaged the crops, and always helped them by destroying a great number of insects that ate all sorts of growing things, Rusty had nothing whatever to fear from anybody in the farmhouse. Except the cat, of course. There was really no reason for Rusty's flying through the open window beyond the fact that he liked to prowl around the great dusty room under the eaves to see what he could find. Once he was inside, he noticed something had not caught his eye on his former visit. Hanging from a rafter, where the slanting rays of the setting sun fell squarely upon it, was a big bunch of brown tobacco leaves. Rusty Wren gave a chirp of pleasure at the sight. That was where he must have picked up the bit of tobacco that had clung to his tail feathers and upset his wife's good nature. "I'll go right home and get her and bring her here so she can see this tobacco herself," he said aloud. "Then she'll know where that shred came from which fell on the floor." He did not say which I brushed onto the floor, for he never could remember long that he ever did such careless things. Well, Rusty Wren went out of the window a good deal faster than he had flown in, and in less time than it takes to tell it, he was perched on top of his house again and calling to his wife. "I know where the tobacco came from," he sang out. "Just come outside and I'll show you. It's upstairs in the carriage house." To his delight, Mrs. Rusty answered in the sweetest tone imaginable. But she said she didn't want to come out just then, and she didn't seem a bit interested in tobacco anymore. "You come right into the house," she cried. "There's something here that I want to show you." Rusty Wren whisked through the hole in the maple syrup can. Home had never looked quite so good to him before, for he had not been there since the middle of the morning. "What is it?" he asked eagerly. His wife was sitting on their nest, and there was nothing new in the house so far as he could see. "I think I might know." She moved aside then. "Look," she said, and peering into the nest, Rusty saw a speckled egg there. It was really a small egg, but to Rusty Wren's eyes, it seemed decidedly big. He was so surprised that he couldn't speak for as much as 2 seconds, and then he began to sing. He was so happy. Though Mrs. Rusty kept very still, she seemed much pleased. And strange to say, she never mentioned smoking to her husband again. She had something more important to think about. I was right, too. Chapter 10. Bad News. When Johnny Green fastened the tin can to the tree in the dooryard, he couldn't have picked out a better spot for it. Of course, he hoped that a pair of wrens would build their nest inside the syrup can. But what he never dreamed was that the cherry tree was exactly the sort of tree that wrens liked. It was not that Rusty and his wife cared for cherries, but as soon as Mrs. Wren had said how much she liked her new house, she remarked that the old cherry tree was a fine place to hunt for bugs and insects. "Yes," Rusty agreed. "And there's an ant hill near the foot of the tree. It will be very convenient on stormy days, for we shall not have to go far for our breakfast." Not being fond of cherries, they did not look forward to the time when the bright red fruit should hang gaily upon the branches above their home. But there were others besides Johnny Green who eagerly awaited the time and noticed that the old tree was loaded with blossoms, which meant that later there would be plenty of cherries. Jolly Robin was one of those who had a taste for cherries. no matter whether they grew wild in the woods or within easy reach of Farmer Green's yard. And as soon as cherry time arrived, Jolly was on hand every day to enjoy the treat. He was so cheerful and good-natured that Rusty Wren and his wife did not object to Jolly's visits, so long as he did not venture too near their house. They always scolded loudly when an outsider came too close to their home, for they had a big family of children, and they couldn't help feeling that the youngsters were safer with no prying busybodies to meddle with them. Of course, Jolly Robin never once thought of harming any of Rusty's family, and as soon as he saw that Rusty, and especially his wife, wanted him to keep away from their side of the tree, he took care to respect their wishes. Then all was peaceful, and the three had many pleasant chats together. At last, however, Jolly Robin made a remark one day that threw both Rusty and his wife into a flutter of alarm. Jolly Robin had not meant to frighten them. But the news was out before he realized that it was far from welcome to his two little listeners. "Jasper Jay has heard about these cherries," he announced, "and he says that he's coming over here as soon as he can find time, for he is specifically fond of all kinds of cherries, no matter whether they're red cherries, or black cherries, or choke cherries." Rusty Wren glanced quickly at his wife. He could easily see that Jolly Robin's speech had upset her. And, to tell the truth, he did not himself relish the prospect of a visit from anybody as boisterous and quarrelsome as that famous bully, Jasper Jay. "Can't you prevent his coming?" Rusty asked Jolly Robin. But Jolly Robin shook his head. "When Jasper Jay makes up his mind, I know of no way to make him change it," he said. Uh-oh. Chapter 11. The Noise on the Roof. As soon as she heard that Jasper Jay intended to visit her cherry tree to enjoy the ripe fruit, Rusty Wren's wife began to worry, and she made herself so unhappy that Rusty couldn't help wishing that Jolly Robin had kept his news to himself. "Don't be alarmed," he said to her after Jolly had gone. "Jasper Jay can't harm the children, for they'll be safe in the nest, and luckily our doorway is too small for him." But Mrs. Rusty wouldn't be calmed. "He's a great cruel bully," she replied, "and if he spends much time here, I'm afraid the children will starve, for neither you nor I will be able to go out and find food for them, because Jasper would be sure to pounce on us, and what chance would we have against him?" "We'll go together," said Rusty Wren, looking very brave. But Mrs. Wren said she wouldn't think of leaving her 6 small children all alone in the house. Wow, 6. They've been busy. "Everything will be all right," Rusty assured her. "You know Jasper isn't coming unless he can find the time. Jolly Robin said so, and maybe he won't be able to get here at all." They had gone inside their house to talk over the matter in private, and Rusty had hardly finished speaking when a loud bang, followed by a clatter, sounded on the tin roof above their heads. It was no wonder that they both jumped. "Goodness!" exclaimed Rusty's wife. "What's that?" But Rusty couldn't tell her. During all the weeks they had lived there, he had heard nothing like that. While they listened, the noise was repeated, and Mrs. Rusty declared that the sky must be falling, for she had never heard such a dreadful sound in all her life. "I'll go right out and see what it is," Rusty Wren said, but his wife caught hold of his coat-tails and begged him to stay with her. "No, no," she cried. "You must not stir out of the house. I'd be terribly worried if you left me alone here with these 6 small children, and you might get hurt besides." Meanwhile, the racket on the roof continued. with only a short pause between each outburst. The 6 wren children began to cry, for they were hungry as well as frightened. Aww. And all the time, Mrs. Rusty clung to her husband's coattails and besought him not to leave her. To tell the truth, he had no such intention. Though he was very brave for his size, he was thoroughly alarmed. And for the time being, he was quite content to stay inside his snug house and hope that the trouble would soon come to an end. On the whole, the Wren family spent a very unpleasant quarter of an hour. The bang, clatter, bang on their roof still continued until the din became almost unbearable, and Rusty Wren grew so desperate that he had almost made up his mind. To break away from his wife, even if he had to leave his coattails behind him and dash out the doors to see what was the matter. Then, all at once, a different sound fell upon their ears. And as soon as they heard it, they knew at once the sky was not falling anyhow. "Jay! Jay!" Jasper Jay's harsh voice was unmistakable. He had been playing one of his sly tricks on the Wren family, and they had never guessed that it was he. Oh, there he is, dropping cherries on top of their syrup can. What a meanie. Chapter 12. The Unwelcome Visitor. "It's Jasper Jay!" Rusty Wren cried as soon as he and his wife heard the hoarse cry from outside their house. "He's playing one of his tricks on us, and I'm going out and tell him exactly what I think of him." "Don't forget to tell him what I think of him, too," Mrs. Rusty said, as she let go of her husband's coattails. Then Rusty hurried through the little doorway, and there was Jasper, sitting on a limb above the house, with a cherry in his bill, which he had let fall with a sly smile. The cherry struck the roof of Rusty's house with a loud bang, and then came the same clatter to which the Wren family had been listening. "Here, stop that!" Rusty cried. Jasper Jay shrieked with laughter. "Go away," said Rusty. "Go away yourself," retorted Jasper. "This is my home," Rusty Wren told him hotly, "and you've no right to come here and frighten my wife and children like this." "How shall I frighten them, then?" Jasper Jay asked him. "Perhaps you like this way better," he shouted, and with that he flew straight at Rusty Wren. He was so big, and he looked so cruel, that Rusty turned tail and dashed back into his house again, and he was glad that his doorway was not much bigger than a 25-cent piece, because he knew that Jasper Jay could never squeeze through so small an opening. Jasper alighted on top of the house and jumped up and down on the roof, striking it with his bill and screaming angrily. "Don't be afraid," Rusty said to his wife. "He can't do any harm, and after a while he'll grow tired of staying here and he'll go away." Well, Rusty was half right at least, for Jasper Jay went away at last, but he didn't wait until he had grown weary of his rowdyish sport. Now Johnny Green happened to hear Jasper's harsh cries, and looking out of the window, he saw Jasper's strange performance. "That blue jay is teasing my little wrens," Johnny Green cried indignantly, and, catching up a potato from the kitchen table, he hurried to the door and hurled it as hard as he could at the blue jay troublemaker. Oh, the blue-coated troublemaker. The potato missed Jasper Jay by less than an inch, bringing up kerplunk against the trunk of the old cherry tree, and breaking into several pieces. And then it was Jasper Jay's turn to be alarmed. He jumped off the roof of Rusty Wren's house as if he had been shot, and dashed off as fast as his handsome wings could carry him. He knew of no way to tease Johnny Green, so there was really no sense in his staying in Farmer Green's yard any longer. Johnny Green jeered at Jasper as the frightened bully hurried away. "You'd better not come skulking around here again," he shouted. Although the cherries hung red and juicy upon the old tree for at least a week longer, just begging to be picked, as one might say, Jasper Jay did not come back to enjoy them. He told Jolly Robin that he was entirely too busy to waste his time in an old cherry tree. To be continued.